All right, let's dive right into this explainer where we're going to break down the actual mechanics of real-world terror. We usually think of scary stories as just that, stories, movies, campfire tales, that kind of thing. But what actually happens when the totally mundane just suddenly turns malicious? Today, we're dissecting the anatomy of a nightmare. We're mapping out the specific tactics, the scenarios, and the environments where everyday people literally found themselves face-to-face with the unthinkable. We've put together a series of true, terrifying survivor accounts, and by tearing these apart, we're going to see exactly how danger operates out there in the real world.
Agnes is playing with it. Just let that sink in for a second. That absolutely chilling phrase came from a 6-year-old boy named Cody, who was just sitting there playing in an otherwise empty room. It perfectly sets the stage for the deep dive we're taking today. I mean, it's a quote that just sends a shiver down your spine, right? Because it completely violates our core understanding of reality. And it's that exact violation, that sudden, jarring snap from totally normal into absolute horror, that connects every single account we're looking at today.
So moving into Section 1, the illusion of safety, or when the mundane becomes a nightmare.
Look, we all have routines, right? We kick back at home on a rainy evening. We completely trust our environment. But here's the thing. Predators absolutely bank on the fact that you aren't expecting a threat. Picture this. It's a cozy, heavily stormy night indoors. A teenager's just watching TV, feeling perfectly safe. But then, bam, a monstrous bang on the window totally shatters that safety. Outside in the pouring rain, there's this blurred face screaming for help, claiming to be really hurt. Now the kid naturally almost opens the door to help him. But then, right at that exact moment, a neighbor calls the house in an absolute panic. The neighbor tells the dad, do not open that door. The guy outside isn't a victim at all. Turns out he had just been rummaging through the neighbor's shed and was now literally crouching on their front stoop, clutching a massive chopping axe. This crazed attacker was just using a desperate plea for help to try and trick his way inside.
That brings us to Section 2, the relentless pursuers. Threat stalking from the shadows.
These unseen stalkers, they rely entirely on isolation and our blind spots, basically turning a simple walk into a high-stakes hunt. Take this one story. A teenager is walking just 2 short blocks to his girlfriend's house, but he keeps hearing it, rustling bushes, snapping twigs right behind him. He finally makes it to her property, calls her, and she looks out her window only to ask, "Hey, who is that guy right behind you?" Literally, a fully grown man was crouched down, silently stalking him just 10 feet away, and instantly lunged for a headlock. Or, get this, consider a grandfather walking his Boston Terrier, Sherry, along a woodland trail right around sunset. He passes a stranger in a hood who totally ignores his greeting. Weird, right? But the dog Sherry keeps looking back. The stranger hadn't kept walking. He had actually slipped behind a tree and was silently trailing them, just waiting for the absolute perfect moment of isolation to strike.
But here is the absolute game changer. Immediate aggressive resistance works. When that stalker in the woods finally made his move, literally clapping a gloved hand over the grandfather's mouth and nose, the grandfather did not freeze. He struggled, his dog actually bit the attacker, and the grandfather blindly dug right into his coat pocket. He pulled out pepper spray and sprayed his attacker at least 10 times to escape. Yeah, you heard me right, 10 times. He just kept spraying until the guy screamed and let go. He survived simply because he was prepared and he fought back instantly.
Okay, let's take a quick breather here. Really ask yourself, what would you actually do if a stranger knocked on your door at 2:30 a.m.? When your safety is suddenly challenged in the dead of night, your brain really struggles to process that anomaly. Do you open the door just to be polite? Because, as we're about to see, politeness can be the exact weapon a predator uses against you.
Which leads us perfectly into Section 3, the Trojan horse deception. Predators who weaponize kindness.
So, some predators don't want to break the door down. Instead, they use deception to completely bypass your physical and mental defenses. They convince you to just unlock it for them. Look at the surprisingly varied methods they use. We already talked about the guy screaming for help in the rainstorm, right? But what about a man knocking on a rural door at 9 p.m. offering free Clorox samples for some new business? Sounds innocent enough, until the homeowner's mom looked past him and saw 5 other grown men sitting completely silently inside his minivan. No way. Or take the deeply terrifying case of a serial rapist who preyed on lone women walking home from bars at 2:30 a.m. How? By simply pretending to be the cab driver they had requested. These predators are literally manipulating our human empathy and everyday social norms just to get within striking distance.
To really put this into perspective, consider the rapidly escalating tension of a backcountry skier.
He was camping with his friend, Q. They got separated, and the skier runs into this seemingly friendly guy in a ski mask, who claims he and his wife are just looking for a campsite. Naturally, out of basic human kindness, our skier agrees to lead him back to his camp. But notice how the dread just builds here. First, the skier realizes the man has no wife with him. Okay, weird. Then it clicks. The man's skis and backpack belong to his missing friend Q. The skier totally panics, dives into his tent to grab a flare gun, but the stranger grabs his leg and stabs him deeply. Thankfully, the skier manages to fire the flare gun and scare the guy off. But both he and his friend Q, who, it turns out, had already been stabbed and robbed by this exact same man, had to be airlifted out by a rescue helicopter. Think about that. Kindness literally almost cost them their lives.
Moving on to Section 4, Discovering Unthinkable Horrors. Stumbling into a trap.
So what actually happens when you accidentally walk directly into the monster's trap without them even lifting a finger? Well, take the absolutely stomach-churning case of two 12-year-old kids on bikes. They decided to explore an abandoned house in a notorious gang neighborhood. Peeking through the window, they spot what looks like a discarded Halloween decoration, just a fake head sitting on the sill. Being mischievous kids, they sneak inside to check it out. One of the boys picks up the head in the dim light and then instantly drops it and screams because it felt like real skin, and then real blood started pouring onto the floor. It was an actual gang victim's severed head just left there as a message. And as if that's not horrifying enough, as they stood there staring at it, they heard the floorboards creaking in the ceiling right above them. Someone else was still in that house.
Or how about this one? A guy shows up at a house for a standard Craigslist pickup. He's just trying to buy a ping pong table. He gets led down into a musty basement by the homeowner, who then conveniently forgets the paddles upstairs and leaves him totally alone. While he's waiting, the buyer gets a little curious, peeks into a half-open utility drawer, and discovers these horrific Polaroids of a girl tied to a chair with a taped mouth. And they're sitting right next to a row of yellow folders labeled A through Z. Obviously, he bolts for the stairs, only to find the door locked from the outside. The guy on the other side raspily claims it was just an accident and says he's going to find the key. Yeah, right. The buyer didn't stick around to find out. He sprinted back to that utility desk, grabbed 3 screwdrivers, and miraculously jimmied the lock open with the smallest one, booking it straight to the police. He had literally stumbled into a vile dark web trafficking ring. It's just a grim, real-world reminder that these heinous predators actually exist, and immediate action is the only way out.
All right, let's jump to Section 5, the unexplained and paranormal. When logic fails,
You know, sometimes the threat out there doesn't carry an axe or a knife. Sometimes it completely defies logical explanation altogether. Let's talk about the chilling concept of mimicry. It's a classic horror movie trope, sure, but hearing it described in reality, it is entirely unnerving. Picture this. A young boy is just watching cartoons when he repeatedly hears his mom calling him from down in their pitch-black basement. So he walks halfway down the stairs, peers into the dark, and hears his mother's exact voice calling his name from the shadows. Terrified, he runs back upstairs, only to bump literally straight into his actual mother who had just rushed down from the top floor. Whatever was down in that basement was perfectly mimicking her voice just to lure him into the dark.
And this brings us full circle right back to little Cody, the 6-year-old from the beginning of our explainer. His babysitter was just watching him play when a mechanical crank toy sitting all the way across the room suddenly started playing by itself. When the babysitter asked how that was even possible, Cody casually replied,
Agnes is playing with it.
Later that very same night, the babysitter hears a knock on the bathroom door. She opens it, empty hallway. But down at the far end, a heavy bedroom door slowly begins to creak open. When she walks in and finds Cody just sitting on the bed, she asks him who pushed the door. His answer?
Agnes.
Just wow.
This brings us to our final part, Section 6, Trusting Your Survival Instincts or the Common Denominator of Survival.
look, if there is one absolutely massive takeaway from deconstructing all of these nightmares, it's this. Survival is not about luck. It's about immediate action. It's about trusting your internal alarm system when a situation feels even slightly off. Our brains are actually incredibly good at subconsciously recognizing when a pattern is broken, even if our logical side tries to just polite it away. Think about it. The grandfather didn't hesitate for a second to use his pepper spray. The dad in the rainstorm firmly refused to open his front door despite the desperate screaming. A witness noticed the bizarre, overly familiar vibe of that fake cab driver at 2:30 a.m., stayed loud, stayed present, and completely scared him off. And that Craigslist buyer? He didn't wait around for the guy to come back with a key. He grabbed a screwdriver and saved his own life.
So, I'm going to leave you with this final, incredibly important thought to chew on. The next time you're walking alone and you hear a twig snap right behind you, are you going to turn around or are you going to just keep walking? Because truly understanding the anatomy of these nightmares, recognizing how predators actually operate, and trusting your gut is without a doubt your absolute best defense when that comfortable illusion of safety inevitably shatters. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Stay sharp out there and always, always pay attention to your surroundings.